let's take a look at what inequality means. So in is a prefix that means not. So like, for example, if you have an assignment that's incomplete, that means not complete. And so this word here, inequality, means not equal. So like if you have people that are homeless in the streets and you have people that are living in apartments or homes, that means that there's an inequality. Now, today's lesson is about inequality signs. And inequality signs look like these signs right here. Inequality signs compare values that may or may not be equal. Now, another thing is that inequalities have infinitely many solutions. And if that doesn't make sense right now, it's okay. We're going to make sense of that later on too. Sometimes students get confused on which sign to use for inequalities. Now, one way to remember is to think of the inequality signs as alligators or baby sharks or whatever you can think of here. So for example, if we look at this picture right here, it says here, Mr. Alligator is hungry for lunch. Find the biggest number and munch, munch, munch. So basically what we're saying is the alligator likes to face the bigger number. Okay, 8 is bigger, so the alligator is going to face this way. 10 is bigger than 4, so the alligator is going to face this way. That's one way to think about inequalities. But another way to think about inequalities is to think of this, where the greater number, the larger number, is going to be next to the larger space. And you see right here, the difference between these two lines is a large space. So the larger number is always going to be next to the larger space. Now, if we look at some examples of inequalities right here, this 5 is larger than 4. And we can also tell because the alligator is facing that way, but also there's that large space in between the two lines. Okay? Now this is going to get interesting. There's some other symbols here that we need to know. Okay, so like this sign right here, this is a greater than or equal sign. Now this line right here, we're going to represent that as an equal sign. That's going to be an equal sign, even though there's only one line. And so what we're saying over here is that 400 is either greater than 1 or it's equal to 1. 400 is either greater than 1 or it's equal to 1. Okay? Now we can also use variables together with numbers. Okay? Now let's look at this example right here. The way we read this is 35 is less than 35, or 35 is equal to 35. Okay? We know this is true because 35 is equal to 35. And that's why we can use this sign. This is a less than or equal sign. 35 is less than or equal to 35. Just like we can say that 67 is greater than or it's equal to 67. 67 is greater than or equal to 67. Alright, so we're going to play a little game called Guess My Age. And before you actually start guessing numbers in terms of how old I am, we're going to give you a hint. And for this hint, I'm going to tell you that we're going to use the letter D. So we're going to use this variable called D, and we're going to say let D equal to my age in years. And here's my hint. Here's my age, and we have the symbol, and we have the number 80. Now, I'm going to pretend to be a 5th grade student, and I'm trying to figure out what this symbol means. Okay? Now, I forgot what I learned. But I remember this. I remember that this little sign is like an alligator, right? And I know that the alligator always faces the bigger number. So I know that 80 is the bigger number. 80 is bigger than D. 80 is bigger than D because of that alligator, okay? So wait a minute. If D is the lesser number, then I know that D is less than 80. All right, I know that for sure. I also know that this line means equal, okay? So I know that D is less than or equal to 80. And I'm just gonna have to write this above here. D is less than or equal to 80, or we can also say D is smaller than or equal to 80. All right, that's the best I could do there with my pen. All right. Now, since we have all of this knowledge now, we can start making some guesses. And we had some students guess what my age could be, okay? So these are all the guesses that students came up with. D can be 51 because 51 is less than or it's equal to 80. D can be 14. D can be 43. So these were all the guesses that students made. All right. Now, another thing to talk about is whether or not D can be 95. Let's try it. Let's see if 95 works. If I took this D and erase it and I put 95, is 95 less than or equal to 80? You would say no, this is false. 95 is not less than or equal to 80, it's greater than. Okay, so 95 would not work. What about 80? Would 80 work? Let's try it. Let's take that D and replace it with 80. Is 80 less than or equal to 80? You would say yes, because see that equal sign? 80 is equal to 80. Now we know that 80 is not less than 80, but we know that 80 is equal to 80. So 80 would work for the letter D. And there's a special name for all these numbers here, okay? All of these numbers that we wrote for D are called solutions. And solutions is just a fancy word for answers. So all of the numbers that we wrote for D are called solutions or answers for the letter D. And this idea of solutions comes up different times in math. There's a difference between this inequality on the left and this inequality on the right. And let's talk about that difference. Now, I have a question for you all. Can x be equal to 9 for this inequality? Let's try that out. Let's take this x and change it to 9. We're going to substitute 9 right here. So, wait a minute. Can 9 be greater than 9? No, 9 is equal to 9. So therefore, one thing that we learn is that 9 cannot be a solution for x. Okay? In fact, x has to be more than 9 or greater than 9. All right, let's take a look at the same question again for here. Can x be 9? Let's try it. So I'll take this x and substitute it with 9. All right, let's read it. Is 9 greater than or equal to 9? Well, 9 is not greater than 9. But is 9 equal to 9? Yeah, 9 is equal to 9. So yeah, I can put that 9 right there. Okay, that inequality sign works. Okay, this whole inequality works. So therefore, we can say that 9 is a solution. And in fact, x is, the way we read this statement right here is that x is greater than or equal to 9, and x is at least 9. The last thing we want to look at is this thing called, these things right here called number line graphs. And what we can do, well, what we're going to do is specifically look at these two number line graphs. And we want you to think about what is the difference between this graph right here on top and this graph right here on the bottom. What are some differences that you see? One difference that you might see is that this circle right here is closed. It's filled in, and we call this a closed circle. But this one right here, you'll notice that there's a hole in it. And in math, we call this an open circle. Okay? So why is there a closed circle and why is there an open circle? Okay? Well, they did not color in 3. Why did they not color in 3? Well, let's see what happens. If I change this x to a 3, can we do this? Can we say that 3 is greater than 3? Oh, no, we can't say 3 is greater than 3. So that's why they did not color in 3. But if you look over here, why did they color in 3? Well, let's check. Can x be a 3? Let's check. Is 3 greater than or equal to 3? Yeah, 3 is equal to 3. So that's why they colored in 3. And in fact, here's what's happening, okay? What they're doing is they're coloring in all the solutions for x, okay? They're coloring in all the solutions for x, okay? So they're saying that 4 is the solution for x. 5 is the solution for x. They're coloring in all the solutions, okay? So all this red stuff right here are solutions. They're all answers. Remember, solutions are answers. In this example on the left, it says there are less than 80 days left of school. And here it says D is the number of school days left. D represents the number of school days left. And what they're asking is, what are some possible values or numbers for D? So basically, what they're asking us is, what can D be equal to? So, can D be 81 or 82? Well, wait a minute. There are less than 80 days left of school. 82 is not less than 80, so we can't use 82. But we can use 35. Okay. We can also say D is 79. Or we can say D is 1. Okay. So all of these are possible values for D. Now, it says here, write an inequality that represents the situation. Remember, inequality means that we're going to use less than or greater than or less than or equal or greater than or equal to, right? So there's 3 lines right here. And so one of those lines is going to be our variable, which is D. Now we said less than 80 days. So we're going to use 80. Okay. And wait a minute. We said the days is less than 80. So the alligator is going to eat 80 because 80 is our greater number. And D is our smaller number because the days has to be less than 80 because there's less than 80. The days or D has to be less than 80. Okay. Now it says here, graph the inequality. So basically, we're going to color all the solutions for this inequality. Basically, another way to say it is, what are all the answers? What are all the answers for D? Okay. Can D be 80? We're going to say no. Okay. D cannot be 80. So we're going to write an open circle. We're not going to color that in. But we know that D has to be less than 80. So we're going to color on the left side. But we won't color in the right side. Okay? So we're going to shade all of this in. Color, color, color. Because D has to be smaller than 80. And these are all the days that are smaller than 80. Okay? We're not going to color 90 because 90 is not less than 80. We're not going to color 100 because 100 is not less than 80. All right? So I hope this example makes sense, and I hope it inspires you as you create more number line graphs like this and write inequalities and write solutions. All right, take care. Bye.